Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Vasudevaya. Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 2, Chapter number 1, Text 10. Word for word. Tad aham te bidasyami maha Harushiko Bhavan Yasya Shadadhatam Ashu Syan Makunde Mati Sati Tadaham te bidasyami Mahapurushiko Bhavan Amashu Syan Makunde Mati Sati Ami Mahapurushiko Bhavan Yasya Shradhatamashu Syan Makunde Mati Sati Tadaham te bidhasyami Mahapurushiko Bhavan Yasya Shradhatamashu Syan Makunde Mati Sati
Taraham te bidhasyami Mahapurushiko Bhavan Yasya Shradhatamashu Syan Makunde Mati Sati
Tataham te bidasyami Mahapurushiko Bhavan Yasya Shradhatatam Ashu Syan Makunde Mati Sati
Taraham te bidhasyami Mahapurushiko Bhavan Yasya Shradhatamashu Syan Makunde Mati Sati
Taraham te bidasyami Mahapurushiko Bhavan Yasya Shradhatamashu Syan Makunde Mati Sati
Taraham te bidhasyami Mahapurushiko Bhavan Yasya Shradhatamashu Syan Makunde Mati Sati
Taraham te bidhasyami Mahaparushiko Bhavan
Mahaparushiko Bhavan
Yasya Shadada Tamasu
Yasya Shadahatamashu
Syanmukunde Mati Sati
Syanmakunde Mati Sati
Tadaham te vidasyami
Yaraham te Padasyami
Mahapurushiko Bhavan
Mahaparushiko Bhavan
Yasya Shadadhatam Ashu
Yasya Shadahatamashu
Syanmukunde Mati Sati
Syanmakunde Mati Sati
Araham te vidasyami
Tadaham te Padasyami
Mahapurushiko Bhavan
Mahaparushiko Bhavan
Yasya Shradada Tamashu
Yasya Shadahatamashu
Syanmukunde Mati Sati
Syanmakunde Mati Sati. Word for word, tat, that, aham, I, te, unto you, avidasyami, shall recite, Mahapurushikaha, the most sincere devotee of Lord Krishna, Bhavan, your good self, Yasya, of which, Shradhatam, of one who gives full respect and attention, Ashu, very soon, Syat, it so becomes, Makunde, unto the Lord, who awards salvation, Matihi, faith, Sati, unflinching. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. That very Srimad Bhagavatam I shall recite before you because you are the most sincere devotee of Lord Krishna, one who gives full attention and respect to hearing Srimad Bhagavatam, achieves unflinching faith in the Supreme Lord, the giver of liberation. Purport. Srimad Bhagavatam is recognized Vedic wisdom, and the system of receiving Vedic knowledge is called Avaroha Pantha, or the process of receiving transcendental knowledge through bona fide disciplic succession. For advancement of material knowledge, there is a need for personal ability and researching aptitude, but in the case of spiritual knowledge, all progress depends more or less on the mercy of the spiritual master. The spiritual master must be satisfied with the disciple. Only then is knowledge automatically manifest before the student of spiritual science. The process should not, however, be misunderstood to be something like magical feats, whereby the spiritual master acts like a magician and injects spiritual knowledge into his disciple, as if surcharging him with an electric current. The bona fide spiritual master reasonably explains everything to the disciple on the authorities of Vedic wisdom. The disciple can receive such teachings not exactly intellectually, but by submissive inquiries and a service attitude. The idea is that both the spiritual master and the disciple must be bona fide. In this case, the spiritual master, Shukadeva Goswami, is ready to recite exactly what he has learned from his great father, Srila Vyasadeva, and the disciple, Maharaj Parikshit, is a great devotee of Lord Krishna. A devotee of Lord Krishna is he who believes sincerely that by becoming a devotee of the Lord, one becomes fully equipped with everything spiritual. This teaching is imparted by the Lord himself in the pages of the Bhagavad Gita, in which it is clearly described that the Lord, Sri Krishna, is everything, and that to surrender unto him solely and wholly makes one the most perfectly pious man. This unflinching faith in Lord Krishna prepares one to become a student of Srimad Bhagavatam, and one who hears Srimad Bhagavatam from a devotee like Shukadeva Goswami is sure to attain salvation at the end, as Maharaj Parikshit did. The professional reciter of Srimad Bhagavatam and the pseudo-devotees whose faith is based on 1 week's hearing are different from Shukadeva Goswami and Maharaj Parikshit. Srila Vyasadeva explained Srimad Bhagavatam unto Shukadeva Goswami from the very beginning of the Janmadhyasya verse. And so Shukadeva Goswami also explained it to the king. Lord Krishna is described as the Mahapurusha in the Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 11, in his devotional feature as Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is Lord Krishna himself, and his devotional attitude descended on earth to bestow special favors upon the fallen souls of this age of Kali. There are two verses particularly suitable to offer as prayers to this Mahapurusha feature of Lord Krishna. Deyam sada paribhavagnam abhishta doham tirtaspadam shiva virinchi nutam sharanyam brivyartiham pranata pala bhavad pipodam Vande Mahapurushate Charanarvindam Tyaktva Sutushya Jabsurepsita Raja Lakshmin Dharmishta Arya Vachasaya Ragadaranyam Maya Mrigam Daitaye Sitim Anvaradvad Vande Mahapurushate Charanarvindam. Bhagavatam 11.5, 33-34. In other words, Purusha means the enjoyer, and Mahapurusha means the supreme enjoyer, or the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna, who deserves to approach the Supreme Lord, Sri Krishna. One who deserves to approach the Supreme Lord, Sri Krishna, is called the Mahapurushika. Anyone who hears Srimad Bhagavatam attentively from its bona fide reciter is sure to become a sincere devotee of the Lord, who is able to award liberation. There was none so attentive as Maharaj Parikshit in the matter of hearing Srimad Bhagavatam, and there was none so qualified as Shukadeva Goswami to recite the text of Srimad Bhagavatam. Therefore, anyone who follows in the footsteps of either the ideal reciter or the ideal hearer, Shukadeva Goswami and Maharaj Parikshit respectively, will undoubtedly attain salvation like them. Maharaj Parikshit attained salvation by hearing only, and Shukadeva Goswami attained salvation only by reciting. Recitation and hearing are 2 processes out of 9 devotional activities, and by strenuously following the principles, either in all or by parts, one can attain the absolute plane. So the complete text of Srimad Bhagavatam, beginning with the Janmadhyasya verse up to the last one in the 12th canto, was spoken by Shukadeva Goswami for the attainment of salvation by Maharaj Parikshit. In the Padma Purana, it is mentioned that Gautama Muni advised Maharaj Ambarish to hear regularly Srimad Bhagavatam as it was recited by Shukadeva Goswami, and herein it is confirmed that Maharaj Ambarish heard Srimad Bhagavatam from the very beginning to the end, as it was spoken by Shukadeva Goswami. One who is actually interested in the Bhagavatam, therefore, must not play with it by reading or hearing a portion from here and a portion from there. One must follow in the footsteps of great kings like Maharaj Ambarish or Maharaj Parikshit and hear it from a bona fide representative of Shukadeva Goswami. Om Jnanatamrandasya Jnanajana Shalakaya Chakshurumritamina Tasmai Shri Guruve Namah. Translation repeated. That very Srimad Bhagavatam I shall recite before you, because you are the most sincere devotee of Lord Krishna. One who gives full attention and respect to hearing Srimad Bhagavatam achieves unflinching faith in the Supreme Lord, the giver of salvation. So the Bhagavatam is the literary incarnation of the Lord, as explained in the Srimad Bhagavatam itself. So this is the light in the age of darkness, is the Srimad Bhagavatam. This is where you have to turn to get religious principles, the Srimad Bhagavatam. And the Parodharma is this Aikutiya Pratiyata, the supreme Dharma is achieving this unflinching, unmotivated service of unalloyed service to the Lord Sri Krishna. It's the essence of Srimad Bhagavatam. So the Bhagavatam, as we hear in the first canto, by hearing the Bhagavatam daily, regularly, then all misgivings in the heart become cleared away, and we rise out of the lower modes of passion and ignorance and come to this pure goodness platform, where then we can actually relish the Srimad Bhagavatam in full. So, Srila Prabhupada set up a daily class on Srimad Bhagavatam so that we can get that benefit. And this is one of the 5 things which Srila Rupa Goswami prescribes as the most potent devotional activities to do. One of them, hearing daily Srimad Bhagavatam. So, we cannot stress it enough. Hearing Srimad Bhagavatam from the proper source, representatives of Shukadeva Goswami or representatives of Vyasadeva. So this seat we have, this Vyasa Asana, is supposed to facilitate representatives of Srila Vyasadeva. And Shukadeva Goswami is a representative of Vyasadeva. So like this, one is supposed to hear the right message from the representatives of Shukadeva Goswami and then repeat. And this process is very good, hearing and repeating, and then one can remember and realize the information of Srimad Bhagavatam. So, I know certain days that I remember when I was on traveling Sankirtan, and sometimes we wouldn't be able to read the Bhagavatam very regularly. We wouldn't be able to read it until later because of whatever thing we were doing. Something, we were driving and we had to do a few errands or something. So then the Bhagavatam was a little extended later. And it always felt off. It always felt like I was missing something until we actually read the Bhagavatam. Because that nourishment keeps us going in Krishna consciousness, and it's so necessary to hear regularly Srimad Bhagavatam. So, hearing doesn't mean just showing up for class and just being physically present, but actually hearing the verse, hearing the purport, hearing the discussion, and being able to inquire or reflect on the meaning of the verse and its importance in our lives, practically. So if we're falling asleep or we're spacing out during the class, then make sure you get your Srimad Bhagavatam nourishment, because if you're not attentive, then you're not really getting the benefit. You're not really getting the benefit of cleansing your heart of your misgivings, because you're missing it. So that's why we particularly want to make sure that we hear the verse and the purport, so we can get that nourishment. So Srila Prabhupada starts off with the purport with explaining that hearing of Srimad Bhagavatam and Vedic knowledge is received through Avaroha Pantha, or the process by receiving it through disciplic succession, through the spiritual master and sadhus. And there's this whole, Prabhupada usually brings up this point about just reciters of Bhagavatam, how they do these Bhagavat Saptahas for 7 days, but they're not actually, they do it as a career, not so much as spiritual benefit of themselves and others. So they do it just to make some money or have some fame. They don't actually know the meaning of Bhagavatam or don't apply the meaning. So then their recitation of Bhagavatam doesn't have very much benefit in it. It actually can diminish the faith of the people. So we have to, in order to become a qualified disciple or qualified speaker of the Bhagavatam, then we have to hear the Bhagavatam and we have to follow the teachings of the spiritual master. And then we can get realization of the Bhagavatam. So Prabhupada says that the spiritual master must be satisfied with the disciple. Only then is knowledge automatically manifest before the student of spiritual science. He says, all progress depends more or less on the mercy of the spiritual master. So, Yasya prasada bhagava prasado, yasya prasada nagatikutopi, dhyayans tuvangs tasya yasyas trisanyam, vande guru shri charanaravinda. So we sing every morning that only by satisfying the spiritual master, then Krishna is pleased or satisfied. So this is the foundational principle of spiritual life, is to satisfy the representative of Krishna, and then we can satisfy Krishna. Are there any comments or questions? Yes, Jai Maharaj?
The Avaroha Panta means coming down. It's a descending process of receiving knowledge. And in opposition to that is the system that we see many of the philosophers, Western philosophers, beginning from Socrates and others going, is they don't hear from authorities coming down, but they like to make their own discoveries and their own path. So that's the big difference. And that type of knowledge isn't really knowledge, because it's not, there's no proof, there's no evidence that it's perfect, because the gathering instruments are the senses and the mind, which are flawed, have so many defects. How can one obtain perfect knowledge just through speculation of the mind, agitating the mind? And it's also true that one philosopher cannot become a well-established philosopher unless he disagrees with all the other philosophies. If he just says, I agree with that one, then he's not considered very important. So they have to differ with each other, which makes it basically a farce, because instead of, if someone actually had something right, then everyone should agree with it. They start off, the big question for them is, whether to accept God or not to accept God, or whether there is God, or whether it doesn't matter if there's God. Some of them say that. It makes no difference whether God exists or he doesn't exist. Everything can. So this kind of speculation, it's of no value. But we see in the educational systems, they put a deal of stress on this. And they spend so much time studying, poring over the philosophies of these persons. And then that, you could say that's being somewhat now replaced by scientific knowledge. But scientific knowledge is it's the same group, it's the same category. what authority are they hearing from? They're just building off things they've heard and discovered along the way. They take bits and pieces and then they put it all together in their own fashion. Just like, for example, the Big Bang Theory. What higher authority has told us that? Where do we hear that? Who are the higher authorities? Higher authority would be someone who at least has practical experience. Like, for example, Brahma. Even if Brahma wasn't taken into account that he had realization, but just the fact that he's coming from such an incredible background. His father is Vishnu, and he was born on a lotus flower, and he's the engineer of the universe. That's what you call an authority. And then add to that he's heard also Srimad Bhagavatam from the Lord and realized it and studied under him and taught under him and been guided. So why not accept these authorities of parampara? Parampara means realized souls, not speculators. If someone speculates and gives his own opinion, it's worthless, because by ourselves, our own opinion is of no value. Even Shukadeva Goswami admits that. He says a few verses ago, I received the knowledge of Bhagavatam from my father, Vyasadeva. And then if you ask Vyasadeva, where'd you get the knowledge? I got it from Narad Muni. Narad Muni, where'd you get it? I got it from Brahma. Where'd you get it? I got it from Vishnu. And Vishnu is the source. Krishna is the source. That's where you can't go any further. Where did you get it? He is, but he's God. So God is the only logical source of perfect knowledge, perfect information. And if one doesn't accept God, doesn't know who God is or what God is, he's completely in the dark. Therefore, this chain of disciplic succession is absolutely important. And without getting this chain, going back to Brahma, going back to Krishna, then one is left out. He won't be able to understand. Sampradaya vihinaye mantras te mishpala mataha. That one who does not hear some knowledge, if it doesn't come from sampradaya, then it has no value. It has no fruit. Fruitless. It's worthless. So, therefore, this is the only hope for this age, Srimad Bhagavatam. Because in Srimad Bhagavatam, we are hearing from the source. Source means either Krishna, God, or his representatives, who are linked through the unbroken chain of civic succession. And there's 4 sampradayas, and Brahma Sampradaya, Kumara Sampradaya, Sri Sampradaya, Rudra Sampradaya. And they're giving the same absolute truth knowledge. And there's nothing, no one can argue with it. How can one argue with knowledge that comes directly from the Supreme Lord? Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam.
Yeah, thank you, Guru Maharaj. Jai Keshav? No? Any other comments or questions? Yes, Magadari Prabhu?
I was confused because, as far as I remember, the verse said, "Hear attentively, then get faith." But in the purport, at least at one stage, Prabhupada mentions that one who has faith in the Lord, he can hear. So I'm confused which one it is or about this.
Well, one has to have faith to hear, to even endeavor to hear, because without it, then they won't hear anything. Even if they're there in an assembly where Krishna consciousness is being spoken, they're not going to hear anything. But if one has faith, then a little bit of faith is Shraddha. Just some faith, some curiosity, some, like Prabhupada would say that when he was explaining the stages, he would explain Shraddha and how we've assembled because there's some sort of faith, some sort of interest, some feeling that I'm spending my time to come here, and I think there's going to be something beneficial for me here to hear about this philosophy. There's something, I met somebody who's very nice, so then I have some sort of faith in what they do, or I read a little bit and it's nice. So some preliminary faith is required to hear. And then one acquires more faith by hearing. It strengthens it increases by hearing about Krishna. So they're both correct statements. Continuing on hearing and more about Krishna, then you hear just the different angles of vision of how Krishna consciousness is sublime and perfect. And then one's faith increases in the process, and in Krishna as a Supreme Personality of Godhead. One applies the process more vigorously by hearing about Krishna and his pastimes and qualities, paraphernalia, etc.
It's not that by hearing for 1 week, these Bhagavad Saptahas, Prabhupada objected to them because for all aspects, the idea that one imitates Parikshit Maharaj, who sat down for 7 days and heard. So it's clearly imitation because they don't sit day and night like Parikshit Maharaj did, 24 hours a day, no sleeping, no eating, nothing else. And that's one thing. And the other thing is, they're not really interested to understand like Parikshit Maharaj, nor is the speaker qualified like Shukadeva Goswami. The hearers are interested in some material benefits, and the speaker is interested in some material benefits. The whole thing is, it's an improper beginning. And they think that so I went to a Bhagavad Saptaha, and that's it. Like some people say, I got delivered, I got redeemed. Now I'm redeemed. I'm not a saint, I was just saved. But being saved is not a one-time thing, that I was saved on such and such a moment, but then what'd you do after that? Because even if you were saved, but you don't continue to practice it, then your disease, you'll have a relapse. So it has to be perpetually invoked and practiced. And that's the beauty of Krishna consciousness, is that nobody, no matter what position they're in, they can't become complacent and think, now I've reached the highest stage. I have these decorations and these recognition. Now I can relax. There's no relaxation. You can't relax. Because if you relax, Maya doesn't relax. She sees, here's someone who's relaxing. So she'll come up with a wonderful opportunity for falling right back into the material ocean. And unless we're alert and awake, we may easily become prey to that Maya. And that's her task. So that's the beauty of Krishna consciousness. It's not something you study for 4 years even, or 6 years. Now we go to school, we get higher degrees, so we can say, 6 years, is that enough? No, not enough. I did for 8 years. No, not enough. Nityang Bhagavata Sevaya, Bhagavati Uttama Shloke, Bhaktir Bhava. As you mentioned, all the inauspicious things in the heart are destroyed practically to nil by this hearing. Satam Prasanga, in association with devotees. All the misgivings, the uncleanliness of the heart, so that desires for activities which are not pleasing to the Lord don't even manifest. Or if they do manifest, they're easily put aside because of practice. One has to continually practice putting them aside. And how do we do that? Well, we make it our path, our regulation. They say that the practices habit is second nature. If one has a good habit, then that becomes his nature. So by having good practice, one is protected. And if someone says, what are you going to be doing tonight? I go to the RT, then I Bhagavad Gita class. And so what? That's all? But yes, or some preaching activity. These are protective devices. And Prabhupada didn't skimp on giving us protective 24-hour-a-day program. That is, if one follows it, that's why one can make vows. Someone may say, well, how can you make a vow when you're a young person? How can you make a vow that's supposed to last your whole life? So sometimes people come in and say, I vowed when I was young, I didn't know. Now I realize it just wasn't for me. But how can you make a vow? Because you've seen the efficacy of following it day by day by day. And you've done it for a year or some years. So you should learn from that if I continue to follow these practices, then I will be able to not engage in certain activities. Not that I'm going to give up practicing these things after I become initiated or whatever. Then what hope is it? It's very risky. Because you won't be protected by the same things that were protecting you when you came to that conclusion that I can do this for the rest of my life. So yes, Someone may say, well, I got married, so I wasn't living in the temple. How can I know what's going to happen? Then what does Prabhupada say about Grihastha life? Same thing. You either do it at the temple or you do it at your home. It's not that you become Grihastha, then you don't get up early, you don't chant your rounds, you don't hear Srimad Bhagavatam. If you do, then you're running the risk. Because what's going to happen to you? If you're not getting up early in the morning, then you'll stay up late at night. Stay up late at night, we know what that leads to, getting up late in the morning. And one thing leads to the next, not chanting rounds, not hearing Srimad Bhagavatam, reading the news, reading worse than the news. So this is a big challenge, but one should, when they take initiation, they should basically be vowing, I'm going to follow this morning program, I'm going to follow the temple program. That's what's going to keep me going. And there may be so many other things that one does during the day. It can be any occupation. Maharaj Ambarish was a king. Who can ask for a more challenging service, secular service, than being a king? But he didn't let his administration or his occupation get in the way of his devotional service. He simply applied it. He made his kingdom Krishna conscious. He made all the citizenry, like sometimes we read in the Shastras, that a king will make it that everyone has to follow Ekadashi. In my kingdom, everyone follows Ekadashi. If you don't, there's punishment. Now, you may say that's dictatorship, it's not freedom. But if one is practicing or instituting the Lord's, and he understands who the Lord is, not just that this person says he's Bhagavan, or this person produces some gold, makes magic, some gold, or he healed somebody that had a chronic disease, and they're God. Now, that's not the definition of God. The definition of God is he's Bhagavan, he has all the opulence. Anyway, there's a whole way to find out if someone is God. So if he knows who God is, and he's instituting God's plan for those whom he is responsible for, then that's accepted, that type of government.
Thank you very much. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Gaur Premanande Hari Hari Bol.